Jim Duke Radio Network.
For we are opposed around the world by a monolithic and ruthless conspiracy.
What is at stake is more than one small country. It is a big idea, a new world order.
Well, join me. I'm going to sit here at the right hand of Satan.
My website is jimdukeperspective.com. That's where you can touch base with us, connect with us. You can listen to our show on any of your favorite podcast players. We're on them all. Google Play and iHeart and iTunes, or Apple Podcasts it's called, and all the other ones. So just check us out, subscribe to it, and never miss an episode. Tonight we have a panel, so to speak, a chat panel. We have Julius Rhinehart and Bear Hayes joining me and Darren. Hey guys, how's it going?
Hey, welcome aboard.
Hey,
Bless, won't complain.
God bless you guys.
So I'd like to talk about this BLM and the ugly truth behind BLM, because a lot of people are they misunderstand what BLM stands for. And first of all, if we can try to explain what these groups try to claim to prove. Like, what do you think they're trying to accomplish?
You want to go first, Bear?
I can go ahead and go first. So from what I've seen and what I think a lot of people have seen, initially they presented it as a way of social justice, a way of I guess for Black people. Okay, that's the way it came off. But there, which I know Julius knows as well, you guys have explained this. There's many more layers to this. So there's a social, political angle, but there's also a spiritual angle. And like I always believe, I believe that every movement has a spirit behind it, but only God to certainly will reveal it. So I know we'll get into that as well. But Julius can tell you a little bit more about it too, than a little bit deeper aspect.
So they're trying to equalize. What are they trying to do? Like, what do they want?
Well, it kind of goes like this. We can deal with the cover story first, as Fletcher Prouty would say back in the day. The cover story for Black Lives Matter and for some of these other groups that are out here, there's a lot of groups out here that are they would possibly fit into the realm of what the United Nations would call NGOs. Even there are a lot of groups out here that have certain purposes, and they're into activism and everything like that. But the cover story is they're trying to fight for equal rights for in the case of Black Lives Matter, the cover story is they're trying to fight for equal rights for Blacks. Now, when you when you go just a little beneath, you don't have to go that far beneath. If you go a little beneath, what you find out is Black Lives Matter is just not about Black Lives Mattering, though. It's about, they also fight for LGBTQ rights and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
Now,
how'd they get into that?
Well, here's the interesting connection. The two main, I think it was the two heads. I think, Barry, you correct me if I'm wrong. I think it's the two original heads of Black Lives Matter. Like, I think two or three of them, matter of fact.
Three of them?
Were all lesbians.
Yes.
They were all lesbians. So there's a heavy LGBTQ presence with this. Part of the reason for this, I think, is strategic, because they've tried to wed the civil rights struggle of the 60s with the LGBTQ, quote unquote, struggle that we've seen unravel in the last few years and in the last 20, 30, 40 years even. They've tried to wed those together for strategic reasons, I believe. If you wed that together with civil rights, in especially in the 21st century, no one in their right mind is going to stand flat-footed and come against Black people having rights or Black Lives Mattering or anything like that.
Right.
And so when you wed that with LGBTQ and you put it on the same level now you're seen as hateful and you're seen as evil if you come against the LGBTQ. Now that's come through conditioning, that's come through a lot of different things. But on the surface, Black Lives Matter is supposed to be fighting for equal rights when it comes to Black people. It's supposed to be fighting for justice in terms of police brutality and different things like that. One of the biggest problems I see with that I've tried to tell people is the police brutality is not just happening to us as Black people. You know what I'm saying? Police brutality is happening across the board. The problem, and there's I wish I could remember the name of the site right now that deals with this, but the main issue we're facing is, and this is not knocking, of course, all police officers, because there are some wonderful police officers out there, but within the system, there's police militarism, and that is something that has gotten out of hand. That is something that a police officer needs to be a police officer. You know, we have military to be military. The streets are not a war zone. You know, the streets, I'm not saying they shouldn't be prepared. I'm not saying they shouldn't have guns. They're police. But it shouldn't be like they're going into World War II, and they shouldn't be all like jacked up the way some of them are, you know, to where they practically can go, if they were to go out in a war, they could go and fight in the war almost, you know, looking, you know, some of the stuff you see on TV, all Black and everything like that. That's went too far. But again, not trying to stray too far from your question.
Well, there are some that even some police that do take upon themselves excessive force unfairly, and sometimes because, you know, let's face it, you know, they go into a ghetto area, they're already expecting retaliation. They're already expecting resistance. So I think sometimes they go in there on fire. You know, maybe it's adrenaline. Maybe it is a little bit of you know, racism in their blood, or in their, you know, some kind of bitterness that they hold, that they say, I'm going to convict the person even before they've done anything. And they kind of, because I've seen this not just in ghettos, but even in areas of like where there was lines for certain concerts and stuff. I've seen police going through and saying, all right, nobody act up, and nobody was acting up, but they were like, all right, I'm telling you, if anybody acts up, and they were almost like insisting it, like
well, you know,
starting it.
I'm sorry.
Yep.
You know, some have power trips, but the media has also done a great job of basically putting a wedge in between people, police, you know, and we see that with titles of articles. You know, they'll wait for a Black person to be shot, and then the title is Black person, Black man, white cop. You know, they've gone to using those to cause dissensions and to make us actually lose faith in policing as well. So that's actually help assist. But I wanted to, your original question too, if you guys don't mind, I wanted to read to you the quote from the Black Lives Matter organization that they took down once it got out. Are you okay with that, Jim?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. So it says this. This is their statement. They are committed to disrupting the westernized prescribed nuclear family structure requirement. They are queer affirming, and I know we can go into all this. They are queer affirming, which means to state as a fact, right? The second part of that is with the intention of freeing ourselves from the tight grip of heteronormative thinking, or rather belief that all in the world are heterosexual unless she or they disclose this information. So they basically have said, oh, go ahead, I'm sorry.
That's from their site?
That was from their site. Julius can contest.
What does that have to do with Black Lives Matter?
That's the thing, Jim. You know, it's kind of like, you know, what they call it, the bait and switch. It's like it's like as a cover. It's kind of like on the global level. You know how we talk about it on the global level, how the globalists use environmentalism. Now, who would actually fight against environmentalism?
Right.
But we know environmentalism is the cover story for something that is much bigger that they're doing.
Right. There's always a narrative behind. There's always an intent behind the narrative. Now, it's funny. I got a Black Lives Matter article where they're being congratulated for being on Time Magazine's annual Time 100 list of most influential people. The directors, Patrice Cullors and the others, I can't remember their names. And just to read one paragraph out of this, they claim in this, this congratulatory article about Black Lives Matter Global Network, it's in response to the acquittal of Trayvon Martin's murder, and it's a mission to eradicate white supremacy, which none of us like, and build local power to intervene in violence inflicted on black communities by state and vigilantes, countering acts of violence, and creating space for black imagination and innovation, centering black joy. We are winning immediate improvements in our lives. Now that sounds kind of more along the lines of the intent, but Barry, you read something that's like, wait a minute, this is another agenda altogether.
You know what? I want to be completely honest. When this agenda first originally came out, I wanted to have an open mind about it. Okay. So originally I'm like, okay, this could be something that could work. This could be something that is good, until I start seeing them and how they were putting police against the people. They were exploiting articles or exploiting situations with black, which was the most minimal of all situations of interactions as far as shootings and deaths was black interactions, or white cop black people, right? So what I started to see, when you look at the narrative and you start to pray, you start to discern, you start seeing something wasn't right. And as this movement got stronger, I seen, like you guys said, they wanted to attach something with the LGBT community movement. So to be honest, if you really look at this, like how Satan would look at this situation, it was creative. It was amazing because of so many different levels. You got a political aspect of pushing agenda. You got a racial aspect of pushing agenda. And if you come against that, you threw in there the LGBT aspect. So you basically, it's an attack on God. Like that statement we read was basically an attack on God. You're committed to disrupting the westernized prescribed. That isn't a westernized prescribed nuclear family. That structure came from God's morality. That's God's word,
Right.
is what they're really saying.
That's right.
That's what I don't get in that little piece I mentioned. It says they're to intervene in violence and combat violence. Now they're not saying that they're getting rid of violence per se. They're saying they're going to combat violence. Now, don't they incite violence to try to attack who they say are violent on them? Isn't it like a combative retaliation almost?
They do. I mean, if you want to see Black Lives Matter really going into, I remember Bear waking up to this, and I want to say I woke up to it around the same time, somewhere in there. And the thing about it, I know Bear has to remember this. It was before the riots and everything. This was years back.
Oh yeah,
because the people were already exposing Black Lives Matter, and the information was out there. It's just everybody wasn't being what's the word? They weren't being studious or being discerning and trying to figure things out per se. And I'm not. That's not a slight, just a cold slight. But anyway,
they were kind of. So you're saying they were kind of getting on board with the movement because it sounded like it was a supportive of the community, rather than looking into what it was actually about.
Exactly, because there was a period of time, okay, the Trayvon Martin thing, that happened, okay? And then there was a period of time where things were almost kind of silent. And then, if y'all remember, I know y'all do, George Floyd happened.
Right.
And when that happened, it wasn't just him. There was like some things that began to happen. Stefan was not Noah, what's his name?
I know you're talking about the big guy from that store.
I'm talking about the guy. Yeah, talking about him. I'm talking about the other guy that was over in Atlanta running in the neighborhood.
Yeah.
But I forgot his name right now, but anyway, but mainly to George Floyd. It was like things were on a tipping point because and when that video got released, I really need to remember that brother's name. When they were had a video they released, they waited 3 months after this had happened, meaning this was not fresh information when it hit everybody. But they waited 3 months. Suddenly, it started appearing on Facebook feeds where you could see this young man running through the neighborhood and these two men, shooting him. I have a name in my head. I just can't. Do you remember his name, Bear?
I don't remember it offhand. But I know the situation. It was probably like there was a bunch of situations that the media had exploited, and it got worse. So when people started jumping on, that's when they jumped on it. You got it down?
It's Ahmaud Arbery.
Yeah, Arbery. I said Marbury. My bad. Yeah, Arbery.
Yeah, Ahmaud Arbery. And, and so it was already fishy to me. You know what I'm saying? Okay, wait a minute. You're releasing this. This is fresh in everybody's mind, but this happened 3 months ago, and y'all didn't. And apparently, if I remember correctly, they had the information.
Mm-hmm.
But it just got released months later. And so by the time George Floyd happened, there was like a boiling point. There were tensions already in the air. And then I never will forget sitting there looking with my wife. And I did something I normally tell myself that I'm not going to do because I know how they can manipulate us. I sat there and I watched the video where the police officer had his knee on George Floyd's neck.
Mm-hmm.
And people can say what they want to. That made America mad. That wasn't just black people that got mad. That made America mad.
Yeah, that looked obvious to me. That looked like it.
Yeah.
I mean, that looked like it. It was like the guy was pleading, and it looked like he was pushing harder and wouldn't let the guy, up. From that angle, that's it.
Well, I'm telling you too, that's not what they're taught either. That was something he did. He even had his hands in his pockets. So he really made that look very bad. I mean, they're not taught to lay on someone's neck, especially after asphyxia. It's called positional asphyxia. That's some of the things that you're taught as a police officer not to do.
Right.
So he was definitely wrong.
Okay, so he did do something out of line.
Absolutely. You're taught to either put them on their butt, on their side, you let them stand or whatever. I mean, they could have sat him on his butt and set him, and instead of him laying on his neck. I know he was fighting with them, and I know he was high on drugs, but you still don't put your knee on their neck.
Yeah, there was no excuse, and that kind of gets into something we're going to talk about a little later. There was no excuse for that. None. Right. You can't justify it. You can't say, well, this is what they said he really died. No, he should not have had his knee on his neck like that, the way like Bear was talking about. That should not have happened. But
I mean, why would he try to do that? Like, I mean,
it appears like that there was something personal going on because apparently they knew each other.
Yeah, I guess they worked it. They were guards together or something.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
they had a history. They worked at the same place.
Yeah, Floyd worked security, if I'm not mistaken.
Right.
And the officer worked there as an officer, so they knew each other, is what I was told, or what we read.
Mm-hmm. And so, but what you saw afterwards, though, and it wasn't, to be clear, it wasn't just Black Lives Matter, but what you saw afterwards was what a group like Black Lives Matter is really about. And because of looking into certain things, me and a friend of mine, Matthew Smith, we were one of those that were out early on saying this is a Marxist organization.
Yep.
Because of how they were conducting themselves. For instance, I know what happened to George Floyd. And I know it could cause people to rise up. But the organized way people were rising up throughout the world, not just America. There was people rising up overseas. You know, the way that was happening, that could only be done through a coordinated effort where you have chapters, and you can cause people to kind of agitate, for lack of a better word, agitate, and cause people to rouse the people up, so to speak.
Agitate, right?
Because what you're wanting to do, you're wanting to perpetuate the notion before the media that there is an uprising. You know, this is a tactic. This is a Marxist tactic.
Incidentally, Cullors. This is Patrice Cullors, one of the founders, and the other co-founder Alicia Garza, and then there's Opal. I forget her last name, and they are describing themselves as trained Marxists.
Absolutely.
They make no bones about it. They were a protege of Eric Mann, former agitator of the Weather Underground, a domestic terror organization, but they don't want to be known as a terrorist group. But they are rooted in they said they stand for the ideology.
Mm-hmm.
They're versed on the ideological theories of Marxism, the build of movement that they can utilize throughout the black community.
Mm-hmm.
They admit it.
Yeah, you also, Jim, we can get to it if you want to later, but they are also witches. They were also practicing necromancy and a lot of ancestral worship, which they admitted also.
Yeah, let's talk about that for a second, because it does play a role. I mean, we don't want to say just because people are in the occult, their causes aren't good, but it ties right into Marxism in that way. So why don't you describe that a little bit?
So what I was talking about with Julius was, I saw, just real quick, the nation and everyone coming together, like you said. All these people were trained. But the thing about it is, as Christians, and I'm going to speak as a Christian right now, you know that if you are uniting under the name of racism, not under the name of God, there's something wrong there. United, you know what I'm saying? A united effort without the mention of Jesus Christ was something that was bothering me, especially from Christians. So as I went on and I started looking into it, they admitted it was a spiritual movement. So Melina Abdullah was interviewing Cullors, and she basically said that the practice of calling out the names of the victims was to advocate and protest. It was a way of necromancy, to invoke their spirits. So when they're saying say their names, they are invoking the spirits of the people who died.
Oh, wow! That's like voodoo. I mean, it's just.
It is. It's a form of. Yeah, it's Ifa. It's some practice, and I guess it's a religion. It's called Yoruba, but there's Ifa, and they practice this ancestral worship. And she admits, this is Cullors also said, ancestral worship is very important rituals which were conducted before each protest. So she felt it was very important before every protest to pray, and they would invoke the spirits before they had protests.
Wow.
They would pour out libations and everything.
Yeah,
wow.
And they also were attacking Christians, which is something they don't talk about. There was a older black man who was holding a sign that says, Jesus loves you, Jesus saves. And the Black Lives Matter, a large part of their movement, March said, and they were quoted, F your Jesus. I have the video. They were quoting F your Jesus, and they threw eggs at this black older man. So this black man was actually attacked for his own beliefs.
Wow.
And there were certain parts of it, I know you remember this too, Bear, where Bibles were being burnt.
And absolutely. They were burning
Bibles were being burnt. And they were saying things like this. And this is, I even made a post about this. They were saying there were chants, hey ho, Western civilization has got to go. And people don't realize when you're dealing with Marxism, when they're saying Western civilization, they're including everything in Western civilization, which would include Christianity. And if a person is not versed or they don't know the buzzwords of Marxists and everything, they'll miss what's being said. You know, a lot of people will hear, because I remember I was telling a pastor friend that I know. He wasn't agreeing with me. He was not agreeing with me or my friend Matt when we were coming out against Black Lives Matter. And he was like, he was not seeing the connection. Now, I know you've looked into it, Jim. And I know Bear's probably looked into it. He was not seeing the connection between Marxism and occultism. And so I was telling him that when you look into Karl Marx, Karl Marx is likely a Satanist. And I'm only saying this because some people may be listening to this and they're like, wait a minute, they were trained Marxists, but they were into voodoo and everything like that. Absolutely. Some of what you would think on the surface is disjointed and disconnected is not as much of a contradiction as people would think. Marx even got his, for instance, if we go further, Marx got his theory, some of his theory from Hegel. When you look into Hegel was into occultism, essentially. You know what I'm saying? So it's not that far disjointed. I wanted to do something real quick. Really quick. Yeah. This is from William Steele's book, New World Order, The Ancient Plan of Secret Societies. On page 138, he says about Karl Marx. He said, Marx, however, eventually became too radical even for the Italian head of the Illuminati. Mazzini was one of the few who maintained a friendship with Marx throughout his life. Mazzini, a murderer in his own right, said that Marx had a destructive spirit. His heart burst with hatred rather than with love toward men. Here's the interesting part toward the end. He says, it is interesting to note that during the last years of his life, Marx undertook to learn the Russian language as though privy to the eventual direction communism would take. He died on March 14th, 1883 in London and was buried in Highgate Cemetery, which has since become a center for British Satanism.
Wow.
Mysterious rites of black magic are still celebrated at Marx's tomb.
Wow. See,
he got that info from Richard Wurmbrand, who wrote the book Marx and Satan.
Now, this is interesting because, all right, so as you know, Julius and Bear, that this is how they work. And I said this in the past. Atheism, let's say this. Marxism stresses on secular humanism, right? Like it endorses, religion is the opiate of the people. It teaches irreligious aspects, like we don't need religion, secular society, secular government. But what you find, the people that are behind the secular governments, the humanists, many of them are not irreligious. Right. They're occultists, they're Satanists, but they come across as atheism because atheism to them is a bridge to break down Christianity. It's not meant to be anti-God, like we don't want a God, we don't want a belief in God, because they have their own God, but they do oppose the God of heaven. But their whole thing is to stress atheism as a way to secularize society so that it doesn't think about God. But their whole thing is based on spirituality of occultism. But atheism is nothing more than a front to break down Christianity. That's all it is. People don't realize atheism isn't really a thing. It's a fake facade for something else.
Well, there's two things. If you look at William Steele's book, he breaks down how the mystery schools degenerate a person. They start them off. They want you to come in believing in God. They want you to believe in God.
Oh, yeah.
And then you go from believing in God to becoming extremely liberal in your beliefs. Oh, that New Testament, that Old Testament, we can't trust all of it. Oh, did God really do this?
Yeah.
And then you end up you go from liberalism, that sort of liberalism, to atheism, Then you go from there. So he said something along
Well,
these lines.
it's deism,
There,
and
just-
I think deism is in between that. Like separate the God's influence in your life and say that he's just a distant creator that has no say or no interest in his creation. Therefore, then it puts man back in charge, and then it steps to atheism.
and you're right, because I believe it is theism, deism, atheism, which somewhere in there is Satanism, essentially, because Satanists essentially are hardcore atheists,
Right.
in a sense. And then Luciferianism. When you look at everything, it's in the broad spectrum of everything. Like you're saying, Marxism is not the final revolution. It's not. It's meant to be seen as a process. A good way to understand it, is when you go back again to Hegel. Marx was influenced by Hegel, but guess who else around the same time was influenced by Hegel? The international bankers. A lot of the elites were going over to Germany to elite schools and stuff like that. Some have argued that's why how a group like Skull and Bones could be transplanted over here in America. But with the Hegelian sort of philosophy, you think dialectically, and in this philosophy, progress is made through conflict. This is how humanity progresses upward, I guess you could say, and they progress through conflict, and this is how we're brought to a state, ultimately, I guess you could say, of perfection. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, it's part of what's called chaos magic too. Chaotic influences.
Yes.
To ruffle. Yeah. Wow.
And so when you look at the totality, you look at someone like a Patrice Cullors or someone like that, or you look at someone within Marxism or something like that. While Marxism talks about useful idiots, in the ultimate revolution, Marxists are useful idiots. I mean, that's what they are. If you look at it, and I'm not personally calling them that, I'm just saying, if we look at what a useful idiot is in terms of how Marxists view useful idiots, people that are useful to the revolution, and because of maybe their gullibility or whatever, and so they can be used as a tool. Marxists again are not the final. There's not going to be this grand communist society that they're talking. This workers' paradise. That's not the final revolution. The final revolution that the elite want is they want us in a top-down technocratic system.
Right, with a collectivism mindset.
Exactly. Exactly. And in that kind of a system, I would not doubt that some of these people that helped advance their agenda forward, just like in a communist regime, when it's time for curtain to finally fall, I would not be surprised if a lot of these communists are killed. I hate to say that because I don't want to see that happen to anybody.
Well, if we take, and I don't want to make credibility out of this because it's still in conflict whether it is a true letter. But you guys are aware of the letter from Albert Pike to Mazzini about the three world wars, plans for 3 world wars. And despite whether you think it's a hoax from Leo Taxil to gain distrust in the Catholic community to prove how gullible people were to believe it, it's played out. And the last point is to annihilate atheism. You're exactly right. How you kind of pose that.
Yeah,
communism and atheism. Now, the Jesuits get involved in social justice, which is really ironic that it's a anti-Christian movement, yet even the Vatican and Jesuits are not necessarily for Black Lives Movement, the movement, but for the Black Lives Movement social justice that it touts. And Jesuits they want to be the leaders, the forerunners in progressing this mindset of equalization and equal justice amongst societies, because they said everybody should be on equal grounds, and of course to come to the Catholic Church, missionary,
Right.
but their agenda is just as diabolical, isn't it?
Yes, I would say so. I think that some of what's going on there is, there's a like-mindedness. With some, there's a like-mindedness because the people in the Catholic Church that want power. There's the whole temporal power philosophy that exists within Catholicism. And then, quite frankly, Malachi Martin talked about this. I think some others have talked about it. There are some Satanists in the Catholic, in the very high levels of the Catholic Church.
Yep.
And we're not talking about just corrupt. We're talking about hardcore Satanists that are saying that they're Catholic.
We're talking about high profile cardinals.
Mm-hmm.
When we hear about these stories, and Malachi Martin came out with, and others have said that, and behind the scenes, I've met some. I know people that have met Jesuits, that know Jesuits, and they said they quite frankly told them, they said, we are not who we seem to be on the surface. And he admitted that they have promiscuous sex with each other, homosexuality practices, and not to deface them, but to bring the reality. We know just by their own very writings that they are they're highly classed diabolical schemers. They're the ones that formed espionage, assassinations. They led the spy network. Most people don't know that the CIA, with Wild Bill Donovan as the founder or the director, he went to Vatican to be anointed, and he was dubbed the Knight of Sylvester, a high Jesuit honor position. And incidentally, the CIA is an intel agency. And that's what the Jesuits were versed in. And what they did was they used their lowly cover in order to infiltrate groups. They infiltrated Protestantism, become a Protestant to the Protestant. They infiltrated Judaism, become a Jew to the Jew. They become rabbis. But they led the Counter-Reformation, but they also held, truces with the very groups that they decided to overtake. And they promoted socialism and globalism. And one of their biggest things is to basically rally on these social justice movements because it helps promote their globalism.
Well, they helped to corrupt certain parts of Christianity, just regular Christianity. Liberation theology came out of Jesuit order, essentially. Malachi Martin wrote a book on the Jesuits, and he literally has a chapter on liberation theology in there.
Yep.
And of course, when you look over in our community, African American community, Black people have what's called Black liberation theology, which is nothing but liberation theology in woke verbiage. That's the modern way I could say it. That's all it really is. So that means it's going to be a fusion of theology and Marxism.
Now, some in the community have come against this. You brought up, Julius, you brought up the documentary film that's been hosted by Candace Owens.
Right.
It's saying the greatest lie ever sold, George Floyd and the rise of BLM.
I know you looked at it, Bear. What was I did too, but
Basically, what I'll say is, I know you were talking about, Julius made a good point saying about new neoconservatism. I know that's what you were talking about too. I'll let you explain that one more. But this is what I'll say. I watched the film. The only thing that I had a little bit of problem with was the way everything was kind of put on Floyd, as if him not being on his neck played a part in his death as well. In when you are dealing with someone, it's called the Likert scale. So in custody death syndrome, when you're dealing with someone with SIDS, you take for account, there's actually a scale you count, and drugs, being a black or white male, being a male alone is points. Each point gets you higher to having the actual, I guess you'd say, chance of a SID death, which is sudden in custody death syndrome. And with him being high on drugs, him cutting his airway, like we talked about earlier, was still a cause of it. So in the video, I would say that was the only thing I'd say I didn't agree with Candace is she kind of strayed away from that and made it more so all on Floyd when the officer did play his part in it. She did kind of say, too, the officer, she did mention that, but
I mean, she didn't downplay the officer, did she? Completely get him off the hook?
No, she didn't completely downplay it at all. I just felt like it was a little bit more emphasis on that, and I think that's because of her dealings with the BLM movement, which is a destructive, heretical, anti-God movement for sure. But I absolutely loved everything else. I mean, I absolutely loved how they broke down the money, all of the queer affirming money that they gave. They actually used this money to boost the LGBT community, which is what they said they were going to do anyway. So I'm not surprised. And what bothered me a lot about this is when we presented this, and Julius can tell you, I mean, we had some of the biggest fights on social media, and not necessarily bad fighting, but I mean, as far as just trying to get this information and people bucking against it because they couldn't put religion and race. They couldn't separate the two. And they chose, I'm going to be honest, a lot of Christians chose race over religion. A lot of church folk, a lot of pastors use this to boost their careers and to boost their numbers and to boost their stage. And I know Julie saw this as well. And they twisted everyone benefited from it. What I mean by that is the people who took the Black Lives Matter movement benefited in so many different ways. And we all could talk about the political aspect, too, of how they just disappeared once the elections were over. Basically their major influences is completely almost, you barely see it at all. I'll say that. But I know we'll get into it as well. There's the money that was raised and how it wasn't even for Black people. The money raised went to almost all LGBT communities, activisms, and sex workers, prostitutes, sex cam workers. I mean, transgender law protection agencies. It was an LGBT movement disguised as Black civil rights. And this is what I'll say, and I won't talk forever, but I noticed this when this movement first came out. The LGBT community began to associate themselves with civil rights. And I know you guys remember that. This was about the time Obama was in office. And the community itself was claiming that it was a civil rights issue. So if you remember that, Julius, too?
Oh, yeah.
And so they were claiming that this was a civil rights issue. And I know I was upset, and I felt like Black people should have been upset with that because I'm born Black. I didn't have a choice at all. And I know they're going to have an argument with us and say they're born gay, but what I'm saying is you're born in color. There's nothing you can do about that color.
Yeah. Yes.
Absolutely nothing. There's absolutely nothing I can do with how I was born. And to hate someone because of how they were born is just ignorant in itself. But the fact is they've taken it, and this was, like I said, you could talk about George Soros and everyone else that's behind this, but they used this and they merged this movement because, like you guys said earlier, and Judas makes a good point, is that who's going to come against this when you bring in race? So that's why they say my brown sisters and brothers. And so it was the perfect, I guess you want to say the perfect ploy for these three LGBT women, trained Marxists, to push an LGBT witchcraft, Satanist, anti-God agenda. So they covered the political aspect, they covered the spiritual aspect, and, they pushed this agenda in so many different ways. And then they just left everyone spiritually desolate. Is what I look at.
They exploited it. They exploited the community. I have an article here. It says BLM founder says he quit the group over its ugly truth, claiming they don't care about helping black families. This is what you're saying, Bear. Former Black Lives leader Rashad Turner, who founded the BLM chapter in St. Paul, Minnesota, claims he had no choice but to leave because they don't care about the people themselves in the movement. It's about an it's a cover, as you said, for something else. They're funneling money through, and he said they're basically using the community to do other things with it. So he found this out, and then there's a real estate scandal associated with this. They're buying real estate with it and, and things like that.
Wow.
And isn't
$8 million.
Oh, go ahead.
I'm sorry. She gave $8 million just to her wife's company and bought real estate. They gave she gave her brother almost $1 million, a graffiti artist, her brother, and to be security for her $6 million mansion. So and paid her mother another almost $1 million and gave her kid's father $970,000, almost $1 million as well, to promote his clubs and production and media, which is all what Candace Owen put on her video. But it's really bad.
Isn't that just what foundations do? They just basically open it up to funnel money.
Pretty much. Is anybody I want Bear, Jim, is our other brother here?
I'm here, Darren.
Darren's here, yeah.
Darren. I'm sorry, brother.
That's all right. Yep.
Is anybody noticing the irony? What did Patrice Cullors say she was? She was a trained Marxist.
Yeah.
But all I'm hearing is capitalism. And I'm hearing the worst part of it. I'm hearing crony capitalism.
Funny.
That's what I'm hearing.
Isn't that just like them? Yeah.
Like we want us a workers' paradise, but I'm gonna live in my $6 million home. Like, huh?
We should have equal justice. We should have socialism, Marxism. Give to the haves and the have-nots. Equal is out. But I'm gonna spend my money and buy me some property.
Right.
Exactly.
You can have everything but Jesus. And that's everything was accepted here. Everything is promoted except Christ. There was never once where I've seen any of these people, they were actually against the promotion of Christ. But what I'll say this is that this movement changed the face of it. This movement changed a lot. This was one of the biggest movements that I think I've seen in my lifetime. I think in our lifetimes. I can't speak for you, Jim. You're probably a little bit older than I am, but it was a huge movement, and it was just amazing how.
Oh no, this was pretty big. This was, with the violence that was attached to it, and the forgiveness, and the tolerance, and the justification. Oh yeah, this was pretty big.
Well, then also when you see that George Floyd's car is still sitting there, and they didn't even help with bills that he left. I mean. And then you have these politicians all taking a knee and with a gold casket just to make this big show for the Democratic Party. And then you look back at it, and these people are still paying George Floyd's bills, and none of it that I know of went to the people that helped him or his family.
And,
it went to.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, you're good.
No, what I was going to say is that, and then. I don't remember, it was ludicrous looking at the news and the news media literally reporting that it was a mostly peaceful, they would be reporting this is a mostly peaceful protest and build whole buildings.
Right.
Whole buildings would be on fire. I'm like, what? How stupid do they think we are?
Yeah, setting cars on fire and such.
But did you guys see the response? They're saying that they were actually, they said some of it in the video too, but I saw some of it on the news and some of the articles, and what we saw was they're making excuses for people who did this and saying that this is social justice and you can't put a limit on what they can do because they're fighting for their race, for their right, for their life.
Right, that's what I was saying. They're excusing it and justifying it, yeah.
But
black man's business, but the other black man who, is fighting for his life could destroy another black man's business. That doesn't make any sense.
But there, again, with everything that's done with these people, ultimately at the top, because ultimately this movement was was co-opted, and it may have been in a interesting sort of way. It may have just been pushed almost from the beginning.
Yeah, I want to ask you about that, Julius. Go on with that.
Because when you look at who was funding Black Lives Matter, one of the people that was funding Black Lives Matter was
George Soros.
George Soros.
Yep.
George Soros. And some people thought that was legend. When you look it up, he really was funding Black Lives.
Oh yeah, Open Society is a big funder of Black Lives Matters.
Right. And then there were some other foundations that were funding Black Lives Matter. There was another group that was involved that doesn't get much talk. They don't talk much about it, called the Sunrise Movement.
Mm-hmm.
Sunrise Movement. Now, they were getting funded by the Rockefeller Brothers Fund. But what do we see here? Nothing new. Turmoil and activism and Marxist agitation happening, and who's funding it? The elite. Nothing new there. But and I'm not saying it to be cold, but I'm saying we know it's nothing new. Many people in society don't really understand that these are the things that are being done to them, and it's being done to them to manipulate them. And when I look at Candace Owens' documentary, it was she's a very intelligent woman, very intelligent. She put it together really good. She exposed a whole lot. She exposed essentially this being done, and this, our people basically being used, and ultimately, I wish I could use a better word, but they basically raped. They basically raped the Black community,
Right.
and were used to just exploit. All like Bear said, a lot of the money. When I was hearing her call off where the money went to, it blew my mind. Should
Absolutely.
not anyone that you can say Black Lives Matter all you want to, in terms of because there's nothing wrong with the actual phrase, but in terms of the organization, after that documentary, should no one support Black Lives Matter?
Absolutely.
I mean, she clean exposed it.
They wouldn't even respond. You see colors at the end of it crying and making it seem like they were harassing her and threatening her. That was hilarious. That was funny.
Right. And it was not even happening like she was saying. Candace caught it all on video. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
It was like that was not. Now, before I say the other part I want to say, because I want to get into the other part of why I feel a certain way about the documentary. But Jim said you had a question. You had a question you wanted to ask me?
Yeah, why don't you go ahead and I'll ask it. We've got a couple minutes left, and I want to make sure I ask you. So go ahead. And
Okay. Now here was my problem with the documentary, and it's what I suspected before I even watched it. Let me start here. The way in which the world system is functions, and I'm talking about the world order, if you will, the way the elite have their system set up. It's so pervasive. I will not say that it's at every nook and cranny, like some people will make it like just everybody. Ain't nothing real, I'm not going to say that. But it's so pervasive that at times people can be used and they may not even know they're being used because of what they're attached to, And Candace Owens has came off to me. First, she came off very radical when she was first coming out. Her original name was Red Pill Black when she was coming out as a conservative Black woman. And then she just started saying her name, Candace Owens. And she just seems like to me to be a radical new face of neoconservatism. Meaning, neoconservatism hasn't went anywhere but they just gave it a facelift. And and one person that's helped in constructing this facelift has been her, possibly the Charlie Kirks of the world, PragerU. And why would neoconservatism need a new face? A lot of people don't remember this, but before Zbigniew Brzezinski died, he made a speech before the Council on Foreign Relations, and he was talking about, and if you listen to the video, it sounds like he was lamenting of it, that for the first time in so many 100 years, mankind is politically awakened. And he was talking, and some of the wordings that he used to describe this awakening, he mentioned things like populism and things like that. And when you look at everything, when you look at even the last 4 years, it would appear, and this is my hypothesis to it would appear that things had gotten to the point, because the internet did not do what they wanted it to do. There's some things that the internet did that frustrated them. You had Jay Rockefeller at one point talking about the internet being regulated or something like that, because it went beyond what they wanted, and people began to be informed. And this is why you had there really was a political awakening. Like, now, these awakenings they're talking about now, I can understand people saying that being satanic. But for, the first, if you want to say from maybe 2001 all the way to maybe 2009 or something like that, there really was a political awakening. Probably all the way to 2016, there was a political awakening. But I believe that they knew that, okay, since we're out there, we're in the public, people know we exist. Like, people know when Bilderberg meetings are now. People they show up. You know what I'm saying?
It's posted on their website now.
Right. So it appears to me, this is what, in really watching this, what it seems to me to be is they recognized, okay, people know that we're out here. So if they're going to know that we're here, we're going to manage how they know it. Exactly. We're going to manage how they know it. And I believe that this goes into a lot. I believe this goes into President Trump being in the White House. Mm-hmm. I was standoffish with my view on him, but I'm a little bit more convinced now that he wasn't who a lot of people thought he was. He's very controllable. Right. As arrogant and prominent and narcissistic he is, and I'll give him that, he's got a lot of control. His ego gets in the way. They know how to manipulate that. Right. I
said the same exact thing. That's what they were doing. They're using him against himself. Like Julius said earlier, is that your people are being controlled and they don't even know they're being controlled. Exactly. And he was the perfect person to set this all up, and he didn't even know it.
And his mottos, the mottos that they had for him, "Make America Great," is coined by him, and all the swamp, drain the swamp. That wasn't even his. It was fed to him by Cambridge Analytica through Banham there. That's interesting. And he said the candidate has to use these terms, and Trump was the one that took it. That's all that was. They did a poll, and they found out through analyticals that's what people would want for the somebody in a conservative side to have support. But here's the thing: you have someone like Donald Trump, and then the news media goes in because he gets elected. I was just reading about this even a couple nights ago, rather. They go off because he got elected, and they start a campaign, in a sense, an unofficial campaign in a sense, where they start wanting to talk about fake news. And now what happened is, you could say Donald Trump used it against them and it backfired. And he started talking about fake news. But it can't be missed that by having this term pushed out there,
and having people having it defined by the corporate media.
Mm-hmm.
See, everybody's not, unfortunately, everybody's not listening to a Jim Duke or a William Ramsey or some of these others that are out here. And so they're getting that from them. And so in their mind, when they think fake news, disinformation, the internet, the ultimate evil is the internet. We must regulate it. People are asking for them to destroy something that was helping them. You know what I'm saying? And it's like, yes, ensure our mind control is pretty much what they're saying.
Wow.
You know what I'm saying? But so as one New York Post writer said, the fake news thing was meant to be a war on real news. It was meant to be a war on real news. But when you come back to Candace Owens, what I wanted to say is she seems to be a new face for neoconservatism. And so in this new face of neoconservatism has went further out, meaning where Hannity used to not talk about certain things, now he's talking about them. Well, you know, we'll talk about it now. You know, we'll talk about some intrigue. We'll talk about some conspiracy. You know, and so honestly, if you want to see, in some cases, news that's going to give you more truth than CNN, it really is true. You'll get more news that's realistic and right on Fox than CNN. The problem is Fox is still part of the system. And so people don't understand.
They're just controlling the conservative narrative. They're appeasing that base. That's all they're doing.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. And so when people don't understand that when you really talk real controlled opposition, this is what it looks like. A lot of times it's not so much that you're going to always be misdirected. It's going to be they're going to tell you some things, but they're going to put a lid on how much you know.
Right.
For instance, one of my favorite books on the New World Order is a book called Hope of the Wicked, The Master Plan to Rule the World. It's by a guy named Ted Flynn. Now, Ted Flynn tells you a whole lot about the New World Order if you read that book. A whole lot. I think the book is about 500 pages. He tells you a whole lot. But you know what he doesn't tell you about? He doesn't tell you about the Jesuits or anything like that. You know why he doesn't? Because Ted Flynn is a Catholic.
Oh.
You know what I'm saying? And so that's what I mean by how pervasive the system is. So you're going to know a lot, but you're going to miss a lot because you're not going to know about the Knights of Malta. You're not going to know about the Jesuits. You're not going to know about Opus Dei. You're not going to know about liberation theology necessarily or anything like that because this is someone that's tied into a whole system that is essentially being used. And so with neoconservatism has been used for, we know this, it's been used for a long time. And so Candace Owens, here's someone that was speaking radical ideas and saying radical things, and even now doesn't mind looking into radical things and saying radical stuff online and just standing flat-footed and just saying it, whether you 15 people and 300 people come in her comments and say, "We hate you, Candace." She'll still say it, you know. But at the end of the day, when she tells you, okay, and this is who's doing it, she's gonna point you to the elite. No, she's gonna point you to the Democratic Party.
Wow.
She's gonna point you to the Democratic Party. She's gonna point you to the left. The left is doing it. Never mind that in 2000 in the 2000s it was the neocons. It was overseas, had us overseas, had us going against Saddam Hussein. Eventually, later on, had us in the wars. Never mind the fact during the 80s, during the Iran Contra and all that. That was the neocons. You know what I'm saying? George W. Herbert Walker Bush, rather. You know, the drugs coming into the country and everything like that. That was the neocons. But they have done such a job in polarizing that when you speak of evil, if people have not, I hate to use this terminology because if the right people are listening to it, they're like, he's controlled. but if you haven't taken the whole red pill, if you will, as they say, you know, if you hear someone if you look at someone online or on Facebook, like me or you, and they're trying to expose certain things, and they go to the Republican side of things, they're like, you know, they're so polarized. No, it's the Democrats. And I'm like, it's both.
Right.
Carol Quigley will tell you that.
Both.
Carol Quigley said, I read the papers. For 20 years, I examined their papers. I studied the Round Table, the New World Order elite. I know what their plan is. They control both sides. Mm-hmm. I'm just wondering why they aren't doing it faster.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you know what, too? There was something that Malcolm X, they put a Malcolm X quote in the video, and I'll read it. If you're okay, I'll read the quote real quick.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay.
Yeah, and it says, the media, the most powerful entity on the earth, they have the power to make the innocent guilty and to make the guilty innocent. They control the mind of the masses. And one thing that I'll point out to you guys, I know you guys already know this and you saw this, but just in case the listeners haven't. But George Soros said, I believe it was 2017, they asked him about Donald Trump, and he said, we're not worried about Donald Trump. He won't be there after 2017. And after that, you have all the money pouring. You see every network you went to, everything was anti-Trump. They put so much money into pushing a narrative, the Black Lives Matter movement, all of that. And what did we see happen? You know, people who didn't like Biden, who were against Biden, were actually worshiping this guy and pushing. And I know it's not just a political thing, but we're discussing how they use this movement along with back money from George Soros, from an elitist, to push a narrative and to do what they plan to do. It goes with saying they let Trump in there and they already had a plan to get him out and they're going to use the people. And that's what they did.
Wow.
Like now, I don't think, have y'all noticed that former President Donald Trump, have you noticed he's been kind of coming against Ron DeSantis?
Yeah.
You know, I think there's some political maneuvering going on there. I think that, to be honest, I think that the presidential side of things, I tried to give it a chance when I was looking into Donald Trump in the 2016, and what made me give it a chance is it looked like he didn't belong to anybody. You know what I'm saying? Right. It didn't make me jump to his side, but it made me say, oh, he could be the real deal. Mm-hmm. You know? But the more I'm looking at it now, I'm looking at it and I'm thinking to myself, I think on the federal level, it's gone. I wish I could say it in a better way. It may almost sound fatalistic, but I think what we're seeing on the federal level is theater. On the federal level. Now, on the local level, it may not be. But on the federal level, even Ron DeSantis, I won't go too deep into it because I need to look into it. But there's some info out there now about some of his connections even. I know with President Trump, one connection there's some connections that got overlooked. Number one, I know that I missed even, you know, and I'm not saying it like that, but the Mercer family, his connection to them, is possible. Is one researcher went into his possible connection to the Pilgrim Society, and another one, Whitney Webb, who recently came out with the books America, One Nation Under Blackmail, the double book series she came out with. She goes into, she's really big. She's written a whole lot on the Jeffrey Epstein saga, the history behind what gave rise to Jeffrey Epstein, the enterprise, the whole Iron Contra affair, going all the way back actually to Operation Underworld, you know. And basically what she says is Donald Trump had connections, you know, way back to someone who was tied into this grouping. I forgot the name of the individual. So the point is, though, he was someone connected. He may not have belonged to anything, but he was connected. I won't go full steam on that, but I am just about 100%, almost 100% sure that I don't think that a lot of what we're seeing on the federal level is real. And even when it comes down to what we saw with the election and them, even I mean, with January 6th, that's being used as a pretext to domestic terrorism legislation, which is not going to be anything good if any of it passes. You know, and the fact that what caused the radicalization where a movement could go up there, and some of them could get radical. It wasn't all of them. Is literally there were some within the crowd that were down with the whole QAnon sort of thinking. So this is why you saw, people coming and they had ropes to hang people and stuff hang the traitors, and because this is a narrative people that were given that was wild, and that fed into the whole thing of disinformation. This has seemed to be, I think in the last few years, we have lived through a very big psychological operation. I really do. And I think that even when it came to what was happening on January 6th, there were people there that were involved, that were connected to the FBI. There was one person that was actually connected to psychological operations.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it was a lady, right, who when they did the storming of the she was in there, and they caught wasn't it they caught the CNN, the guy saying we did it, or it was a bunch of stuff, man. It was crazy. I had videos of the actual police officers that were there opening up the gates and allowing those people in there and telling them to come on.
Right.
So yeah, that was crazy.
There's a whole lot that was wrong with that day. A whole lot.
Well, why don't we end here? And boy, I chose the right guys for the job here. Thanks, thanks, guys.
Awesome. Good job,
Bear. Why don't you tell people your social media?
All right, it's Bear Hayes, BARE Hayes on Facebook, and it's also Bear Ministries on YouTube.
And Julius?
Of course, it's Julius Rhinehart. You can find me under my name, Julius Rhinehart. It's on Facebook. I'm also on YouTube. Not very creative, I guess, but on YouTube, my name is Julius Rhinehart too. That's something that I haven't really given a lot of time to, but I'm giving a lot more time to here lately. So the channel's growing. Plan to do some more things with it here as the days go on. But those are the two areas. Also, me and my wife have a digital magazine called Back to Eaton News Mag, and we're we have actually two. We have that one. We have the Elect Lady. Now, in Back to Eaton News Mag, I'm actually someone who contributes, and so you'll hear, like you'll read in the articles that I write, some of the things that you heard me talk about tonight. That sort of type of thing. I usually write on the political type things. It's not always that way, but a lot of times I'm going to be writing on political things, writing, exposing deception, exposing, spiritual deception, things like that. So.
All right, and I'm not too imaginative either. My show is called Jim Duke Perspective and JimDukePerspective.com with Jim Duke Perspective and my social media. So, guys, I really appreciate it. Love you guys. Thanks for joining us.
Love you too. Glad to be here.